Good Thursday morning, and thank you for watching us here on Live Impact News. Your time now is 10:01. You are joining us on 13 News Now Plus. My name is Eugene Daniel, and I'm in studio right now with producer Sarah Calloway, and there are a few things that we are monitoring right now at this second. Let's go ahead and show you there. We have President Trump, who is speaking from the inaugural Board of Peace meeting. This is in Washington, D.C. You may have heard of it. This is the group originally created to oversee the reconstruction of Gaza following the Israel-Hamas war, but now its mission has broadened. Several member states include Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and several Asian and Latin American countries who will not be there. How about Pope Leo in the Vatican? He said just this week that he does not agree with the use of the Board of Peace, saying that that duty of what they are currently being asked to do should be led to other groups that are currently already in place. United Nations is the big one that he's talking about there. And then at the bottom, the big news that is coming out over the pond, we have former Prince Andrew has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office, this tied to the Epstein case. We're going to have a lot on those things right now, but we're going to start with President Trump as he is speaking there for the podium. Again, this is the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace.
They're watching right now on closed circuit. Thank you very much, and thank you. That was a big one, Cambodia and Thailand. These are nasty fighters, I have to tell you. These fighters are nasty. Now we talk about, you talk nasty fighter, you're nice guys compared to this. Congo and Rwanda. That was, and we've got them pretty peaceful. There's little flare-ups every once in a while. I'll get a call once a week. Sir, there's a flare-up in the Congo again. We'll get it straightened out, right, Susie? We'll get it straightened out. And Israel, as you know, with you could say Israel and numerous countries if you want to really know the truth, but Israel and Iran, and we'll see where that goes. But when you think of Israel, we've done the biggest thing of all. We have peace in the Middle East right now. That's bigger than people said it couldn't be done. For 3,000 years, they've been talking about Middle East. They said it couldn't be done. And you look at what's happened in Gaza. And one of the keys to it was when we took those beautiful, magnificent, we just ordered 22 more of them, updated model. The B-2 bombers are incredible. I never understood the B-2 bomber. I'd watch, it's a wing. And I've never quite understood that, Johnny. I'd look at it, I'd say it was beautiful, but what does it do? It carries very big bombs. And it went into Iran, and it totally decimated the nuclear potential. And when it decimated that, all of a sudden we had peace in the Middle East because there was a black cloud hanging over the Middle East. And if that wasn't done, that cloud would have been there. And countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Qatar, countries like, nobody could have signed. You would have had that threat. Nobody could have had, you couldn't have had peace in the Middle East. So now we may have to take it a step further, or we may not. Maybe we're going to make a deal. You're going to be finding out over the next probably 10 days. But this meeting today is proof with determined leadership, nothing is impossible. When I took office, the war in Gaza was raging with thousands of people being killed and no end in sight. Today, thanks to unrelenting diplomacy and the commitment of many of the great people in this room, we have 59 countries signed up on Gaza. Think of that. We have, it's amazing. But all the people, many, really so many in this room, the war in Gaza is over. It's over. There are little flames. Hamas has been, I think they're going to give up their weapons, which is what they promised. If they don't, it'll be, they'll be harshly met, very harshly met. They don't want that. All the stuff like they don't mind dying. They told me that's not true. Everyone said, oh, they don't mind dying. No, they don't want to die. They said, we don't want to die. People don't want to die. The ceasefire was held, and every last remaining hostage, both living and dead, has been returned back home. Think of that. That was an impossibility. And we did hundreds of hostages, but the last 20, and I always said to Steve and Jared, I said, the last 20 are going to be very tough, very, very tough. And we got them back. We got the living back, and then we only got about 16 of the dead. And we said, well, you got to get them all. You promised them all. And they dug and dug and dug. You can imagine It's a job that's brutal. And Hamas really did a lot of that work. And you got to give them credit for that. They brought the last one home a week ago, and we got all 28 of them, living and dead. The amazing thing, because I've never seen anything quite like it, the parents of the dead, they knew their boy was dead. This case, boys, all boys, men, but to the parents' boys. They knew their boy was dead. They wanted that dead body as much as if he were alive. And when they got them back, there was great sadness, but there was great joy, too. They wanted it as much as the people that got their sons back alive. But we got a lot of people before those 20, Steve, what nobody talks about. But, hundreds of people. We did a good job, and you guys did a fantastic job. I want to thank every nation that helped us achieve this monumental breakthrough, saving countless lives, and really bringing peace and bringing the concept of peace, because nobody thought peace in the Middle East. I've always heard peace in the Middle East is impossible, and it's turned out not to be. And we do have some work to do with Iran. They can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. You can't have peace in the Middle East if they have a nuclear weapon. And they can't have a nuclear weapon, and they've been told that very strongly. Since the hard-won ceasefire of last October, the United States and our partners have facilitated the delivery of vast amounts of humanitarian aid, numbers that nobody's ever seen before. In November, the United Nations Security Council unanimously approved the Board of Peace. And last month in Davos, we welcomed over 24 members to this very important new organization. And we are very closely working with the United Nations. In fact, I'm going to speak to the Secretary General in a little while. He's a good man. And I've had a good relationship. Other than in my last speech, they did turn off my teleprompter. I got up there. My teleprompter didn't work. I'm sitting in front of all of you people and more. I had no teleprompter. I knew I was in trouble because I'm walking up. The teleprompters are over. I had the most beautiful speech ready. I was all set to knock them dead. First, I had an escalator that stopped. You know that. It's going up. Boom. It's lucky my movie star first lady was in front of me because I put my hand on a certain part of her body, and I was able to stop my fall. Otherwise, because she had no trouble. I said, boy, that was a very sharp stop, Johnny. So I said, that was strange. I've been on a lot of escalators. It's never happened before. Usually it stops very slowly. This was just boom. But our First Lady was right in the proper location for me. I'm waving to people, and she was holding on a little tighter. She knew what was happening. She did. She said, that's a very successful movie out right now, like #1, can you believe this? And it's a big movie star. And I always say it's trouble because I always say there's not room in one family for 2 stars. I told her that. We can't have 2 stars in one family. So I don't know what that means, but it's not good. But it is good because we're proud of her. She did people in the United States love the First Lady, and she did the movie, and it's become the biggest selling documentary in 20 years. Can you believe? The theaters are all packed. Women especially, they go back and they see it 2 or 3 times, 4 times. But together we're committed to achieving a Gaza that is properly governed throughout. The whole area is going to be, so many countries that have really nothing to do with the Middle East, but they're maybe somewhat close by. They're all involved. They want to go in and fight. They tell me all the time, we'd like to send soldiers to fight if it's necessary. And I don't think it's going to be necessary. We have 2 countries that want to go in and do a number on Hamas. I said, I really don't think I hope it's not going to be necessary, because they made a promise, and they promised me get rid of their weapons. Looks like they're going to be doing that, but we'll have to find out. But it's no longer a hotbed of radicalism and terror. And to end that, we have today, and I'm pleased to announce that Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, UAE, Morocco, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, and Kuwait have all contributed more than $7 billion toward the relief package. That's great. Thank you, fellas. Thank you. And many more are contributing too. So the numbers are, this just started. This is our first meeting. But every dollar spent is an investment in stability and the hope of new and harmonious. It's a region that's so important. It's so vibrant. It's so incredible. The people are so incredible, but we want to have a harmonious Middle East. The Middle East is amazing. So many friends in the Middle East. They're so smart. Sometimes they're too energetic. That's a lot of people aren't energetic. Sometimes they're a little bit too energetic. These are great people. The world is now waiting on Hamas, and that's taking place. And it's the only thing that's right now standing in the way. We have Lebanon with certain things that we're working on that are very important. We have to solve the problem of Lebanon, but it's relatively small in terms of what's been done. And again, the key was getting rid of the nuclear potential, because Iran would have had a nuclear weapon based on everything we found out since within 1 month. We can't let that happen. So many of our friends in Europe are attending today, and we're eager to have them become full members. They all want to become full members, and we've had a great response from Europe. And Europe is, it's where I come from, where so many people come from that are in the United States. But we have a great relationship with Europe. We have a great head of NATO. He is a fantastic man, and he's doing a great job, really great job. I'm excited to announce that Norway has agreed to host an event bringing together the Board of Peace. Oh, I thought when I saw this note, I'm excited to announce that Norway, I thought they were going to say that they're giving me the Nobel Prize. Oh, this is less exciting. Oh, it says, I'm excited to announce that Norway, and I'm saying, oh, great, I'm getting the Nobel Prize, finally. Finally, they got it right. But I don't care. I don't care about Nobel Prize. I care about saving lives, just so you understand. We play and we all, do what we have to do. I only have one thing. I don't want to see people killed from parts of the world that are very far away from the United States. And if I have an ability to turn off wars, I want to use that ability, because it's people, millions of people. It's like the Prime Minister said, 25 million people maybe. And that's a small number compared to what it could have been if you really think about it, right? No, I want to save lives, and I don't care about prizes. In the UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Assistance is raising $2 billion for the support of Gaza. Additionally, Japan has just committed to host an aid fundraiser, which will be a very big one. It's already successful. We know some of the numbers that are being talked about, which will be attended by other nations in the region, including South Korea, the Philippines, Singapore, and others. And I know that China is going to be involved, and I think Russia is going to be involved. I think they will be. I want to have everybody, get all sides, because it doesn't help when you have all sides with one ideology. You have to have everybody together for this. I'm also pleased to announce that FIFA will be helping to raise a total of $75 million for projects in Gaza. And I think they're soccer related, where you're doing fields and you're getting the greatest stars in the world to go there. People that are bigger stars than you and I, Johnny. I hate to say it,
Okay, we got to take a quick break here for the next few minutes, but you've been watching and listening to President Donald Trump at the inaugural Board of Peace meeting taking place there in Washington, D.C. We are going to continue to record that as well, but when we come back, we have a special guest in here this morning to talk to us about a new group that's been formed of prosecutors across the country to hold federal agents accountable. Stick with us. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. Again, thank you for watching us now for live Impact News. Whether you're watching us on our streaming app, 13 News Now Plus, we hope you, if you're watching us on YouTube, you would still download our streaming app. You can find it on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. We have a guest with us in this morning to talk about something that has really captivated thoughts and ideas across the country. A group of 9 elected prosecutors have formed a coalition aimed at holding federal agents accountable if they exceed their lawful authority. Here to talk to us is one of the people on that group, Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney, Ramin Fatehi. Thank you so much for being here.
Eugene, it's great to be here this morning. Thanks for having me.
So you're calling this group Fight Against Federal Overreach, FAFO. Tell us a little bit about what you all aim to do and why you felt like this was something you needed to form.
Well, we as prosecutors, all of us are ministers of justice. We are here to protect our citizens from violence, no matter who commits violence. And one of the touchstones for me as a progressive prosecutor and as Commonwealth attorney in Norfolk has been that everybody gets the same brand of justice, rich, poor, black, white. Everybody is held to the same legal standard and nobody is above the law. And that means whether somebody committing an act of violence is a hardened gang member or, heaven forbid, is a law enforcement officer, the law applies to them equally. That is a principle that has been under consistent attack at the federal level. We've seen a level of lawlessness, violence, and enabling behavior that's come from President Trump on down to federal law enforcement, and especially ICE and the Border Patrol. And the surges that we've seen in places like Portland, Los Angeles, and especially Minneapolis are state-sanctioned violence against not just undocumented immigrants, but against immigrants, naturalized citizens, and naturally born American citizens. So a group of us came together and said, what can we do to stand up? What can we do to use the powers of the state system to push back on federal lawlessness? And that's where the Project to Fight Federal Overreach, FAFO, was born. I got a call, 3 Sundays or so ago from Larry Krasner, one of the leading progressive prosecutors in the United States, the DA in Philadelphia. And Larry said, Ramin, I'm making some telephone calls. We're trying to pull a group together. And the purpose of the group is going to be ready to, in case Minneapolis happens in our cities, and Mary Moriarty, who's my friend, as Larry is, who's the county attorney in Minneapolis, he said, Mary's going to be part of this. And I said, absolutely, count me in. And 9 of us came together. Now, there are 2,300 elected prosecutors in the United States. I think it says something that there are 9 of us in this group, as far as both how afraid people are to stand up and the way that the rule of law has been under attack. But 9 of us came together and we're ready to do the things that we need to do.
And one of those 9 also in Hampton Roads, Stephanie Morales out of Portsmouth, the Commonwealth's attorney there. And I was going to ask you if the group has grown since. It seems like it's still at the 9 elected officials currently. So let's talk about Minneapolis, because this announcement came after both the deaths of Renee Good, who we now know ties to Norfolk, graduated from Old Dominion University, and then Alex Preddy as well. This announcement comes after that. We also are looking at the situation where federal officials saying they're not going to be sharing some of the information when it comes to evidence with the state and local prosecutors there also. How would this group, in you all's estimation, respond to a situation like that? Either, let's say, put you all in Minneapolis, or if it were to happen here or elsewhere, how would this group respond to that?
That's a great question. The violence in Minneapolis touched everybody in the United States, but it especially touched Norfolk with Renee's death. My wife teaches at Old Dominion. Renee was in my wife's department. My wife's colleagues were her teachers. In fact, this Sunday at 2 p.m. to 9 p.m., there's going to be a benefit at Elation Brewing on Colley Avenue to try and fund a scholarship in Renee's name at Old Dominion. It's something that I'm not sure why, but apparently the Old Dominion administration's not supporting. But there are going to be faculty and friends who are working on it. So I encourage people to remember that Renee is from Norfolk, and she's a daughter of Norfolk, and that she didn't need to die the way she did. what we saw in Minneapolis was more of the world turned upside down, that the guardians of civil rights are now the violators of civil rights. And a lot of the work that Mary Moriarty has done in Minneapolis is actually modeled on work that we're doing here in Virginia. 4 years ago in Fairfax County, my colleague Steve Toscano, the Commonwealth's attorney, indicted 2 park police officers for shooting into a car for a motorist, a man named Bijan Qaisar. And Steve had to fight that case in federal court. He had the backing of Mark Herring in that fight. And then when Mark Herring lost the election to Jason Miyares folded and dumped the case, which he never should have done. And Steve's case died on the vine for lack of support from a Republican attorney general who called himself Mr. Law and Order. But a lot of the motions practice that Steve had worked on were templates that Mary used. Mary's work and the way that she's had to adapt to the resistance from federal officials is going to be a template for us. The 8 of the 9 of us who were able to make it met in Washington a couple of Fridays ago to discuss strategy. And we have a plan. So if something like this happens in Norfolk, we will have injunctions to file in federal court that day to preserve evidence and to preserve the crime scene. We will have orders to ask federal judges to require cooperation. We will have coordination with state and local law enforcement, where if they won't let us into a crime scene, we're going to set up a secondary crime scene cordon around the federal crime scene so that we know what's coming in and what's going out. We will be on scene. I've pledged and I have gone to every officer involved shooting in Norfolk personally. I will be there at one of these shootings if they, heaven forbid, happen. And then we will have to engage in some very serious and very difficult litigation in court, both to get the evidence and, if we bring indictments, to be able to continue those cases for trial without having them dismissed. And that's a whole nother problem.
And that's what's going to be my follow-up. How difficult is what you're talking about for local, state officials? We're seeing the tension with the federal officials there in Minnesota and Minneapolis. How difficult is what you're talking about to actually do?
Extremely, and it's difficult. It's extremely difficult on purpose. The laws that govern federal immunity, or the immunity of federal officials for prosecution for state crimes, were set up mainly during Jim Crow and during the fight over Brown versus Board of Education and the integration of schools. So it's civil rights movement era stuff. And those laws were set up to prevent Bull Connor from arresting FBI agents and throwing them into kangaroo court in Alabama for enforcing integration. So they are difficult on purpose. And we now live in a world where the cry of states' rights that was the cry of racists and segregationists is now the cry of people who are trying to preserve people's civil rights. This is not good. It's not normal. I never thought I'd have to do this. But those rules are hard. And what they mean is if I bring an indictment for murder, let's say, against a federal official, assuming that I've been able to get the evidence, which that's what all of the earlier motions practice would do, and the coordination with local and state law enforcement to try and bring evidence to the table, crowdsourcing, public portals for videos, just like we've seen it with Renee Good and Alex Preddy's shootings and killings. The availability of evidence from citizens is going to be absolutely crucial. But the rule basically is if you're a federal official indicted for a state crime, you're entitled to have your trial in federal court. So my prosecutors and I would be in federal court trying this based on state law. But there's also immunity. And the standard for immunity is very favorable to federal officials. If they were doing their job but doing it wrong, they're immune. The way that we would be able to go to court is if we can show that they were so out of bounds with what they were doing, let's say multiple shots to the back of a helpless person, that what they were doing was no longer their job. And that said, this isn't going to cover general police brutality. It absolutely doesn't cover cruelty or ICE sweeps where they shouldn't be going. We're not talking about disagreements over execution of their lawful functions. We lost an election, that's why we have to win the next elections. This is about actual crimes. But I got to tell you, the meeting that we had in Washington, it has me prepared and will have my trial team prepared. We met with the lawyer who was the lead prosecutor on the Tree of Life synagogue case, one of the lead prosecutors in prosecuting Derek Chauvin for killing George Floyd, and tried that case in federal court and defended his conviction in the federal appeals courts. It was some of the most intellectually demanding information that I've dealt with in years. But we understand what our duties are. And finally, we have money on the table. We have money in a lockbox that has been pledged for us to be able to hire lawyers, not for anything else, only if we wind up in these situations and we have to litigate in federal court, so that we can bring in the top lawyers in the country to ensure that we can have justice. So you asked about expanding the group. I've already talked with more than one prosecutor in Virginia who's prepared to join the group. We will have an admissions process so that 9 will grow. But that money that I told you about will be available to anybody who has a federal official that they're prosecuting, because we want to make sure that there's justice no matter who's in the group or not.
And 2 quick follow-ups on the 2 sentences you just said. On the first hand of that, when you say available to anyone, that includes even those who may be on a different side of the aisle than you as well, correct? Or in terms of working with them. And then the other question that I have for you is on that number. You say that you've reached out to a few, and there are a few who are ready to join in. But earlier you said there were 2,300 or so elected prosecutors across the country. Why do you think only 9 so far have been willing to join this group?
Fear. Nobody wants to take on the Justice Department. They've got 11,000 lawyers. They have the power of the federal government. They've got President Trump's bully pulpit. And if we've seen anything out of the second Trump administration, it is that people we thought have courage will fold. The law firms folded. Universities folded. Civil society organizations folded. Even though they were legally in the right, people just folded. And frankly, I just think that a lot of our colleagues are scared. And that is shameful. It's shameful because we are ministers of justice. We're elected officials. We need to stand up. But I think some of it is also that even people who aren't scared, they don't know where to start. And somebody's got to start, and somebody's got to be the first one to step up. And I'm proud to be one of the 9 out of 2,300 who stepped up. That's the trust that I asked Norfolk's voters to put in me, and I consider it my moral duty to do it. And what I'll say, what we've seen with Trump is the law firms folded until Mark Elias stood up, and Perkins Coie stood up and sued him. The universities folded until Harvard stood up. And when Harvard said, no more, we're taking you to court, this is wrong, that made a difference. And I think that what we will see is when we as prosecutors, enforcers of the criminal law, stand up, that first of all, the Trump administration starts to back off, and second, other people find backbones, and more people will stand up and stand with us.
When you're talking about working with people from all various sides of this, in your estimation, how could it also help for those who are maybe not more, either democratic or progressive in their approach? In your estimation, this is something that can also help people who are conservatives and find themselves in a similar situation.
Absolutely. There's no ideological litmus test for assistance from our organization. The only question is, do you have a federal law enforcement officer who's committed a crime? Do you feel that your evidence supports an indictment, and are you prepared to prosecute? If the answers to those 3 questions are yes, then our organization will sit down and will decide whether we have money on the table to provide to that person for the work that they are trying to do. We're one of the most toxic and evil things that has come out of the Trump administration is the suggestion that, blue states deserve different treatment, blue cities deserve different treatment. We're not going to say red states and red cities deserve different treatment. Everybody deserves to feel safe. I don't ask a victim what their political affiliation is. They're victims. I don't ask a defendant what his political affiliation is. He's a defendant. That's what matters. And so if it comes to the inner circle, as we're making sort of strategy decisions for ourselves, we obviously want people who we get along with, we understand, and we know. But we'll offer help to anybody who has a meritorious case, and even if it's the only thing we agree on, we're absolutely going to be prepared to help.
And my kind of last question here is, how would you judge the success of this? What are you looking at, as yourself in getting into this? You look at it maybe 2-3 years down the line, and you say this was successful. How would you define it?
I think that success in the world of criminal law and crime suppression is measuring the dog that doesn't bark. That's really hard to do, and it's often difficult to know whether one thing or another causes crime not to happen. I deal with that in my everyday work, but I think that different measures of success here would be: do we see a moderation in the violence and over-the-top nature of immigration enforcement? We're never going to see the Trump administration be anything but the Trump administration. But as long as they're not shooting people without cause, cracking people's skulls without cause, that could be a sign of improvement. If, heaven forbids, there is an indictable case, a successful trial, a defeat of the immunity claims, and presuming that the evidence was there, a conviction and accountability would also be a mark of success. But also the coming together of additional prosecutors from around the country, and a demonstration that we're patriots. We believe in the Constitution. We actually don't think it's words on paper that you can ignore at your convenience. That an increasing push, in an upside-down world where the states are actually the supporters of equality and civil rights as the federal government has started to deteriorate. I'd call that success too.
And one more here. There are critics who might say what you're doing and what your team is doing would escalate the already contentious relationship between federal and state and local officials. What do you say to them?
I think those are the same people who say that we're supposed to talk tough to gangsters and they're supposed to not commit crimes. Would it make sense for me to say, if you're in a gang, we're going to prosecute you, and then have people say, well, that's just going to make the gangs more violent? That doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense in this context either. The only difference being that I think that the average federal agent and the average federal agency is paying more attention to deterrence than the average gang member is. So, no. I said it before and I'll say it again. We're not here to prosecute ICE agents for arresting undocumented immigrants or for being jerks or for doing things that are counterproductive or inhumane or, frankly, even civilly illegal. That's not what this is about. No, they have the right to do that, as awful and counterproductive as I think it is. It is about crimes. And anybody who says, well, you're inviting more crime by saying you're going to punish crime is either not thinking about it or talking out of both sides of his mouth.
All right, this is Ramin Fatehi. You're going to stick around here. We're going to have much more. We got to take a quick break. Stick with us here as we're talking about this new group that's been formed, but also getting a little bit of insight into a case that now involves an international manhunt. We'll be right back in about 2 minutes. We are back here for Live Impact News. Thank you so much for sticking with us here on 13 News Now Plus and YouTube Live. We have with us Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney, Ramin Fatehi. We're talking about this new coalition that he is a part of, along with Portsmouth Commonwealth's attorney, Stephanie Morales, and 7 other prosecutors from across the country to hold federal agents accountable in cases of misconduct. One more question I needed to ask you here on the other side of this is there is the difference between federal charges and state charges which come into play in this situation from what you all are trying to do with FAFO.
Absolutely, Eugene. One of the biggest weapons that Donald Trump has wielded in both Trump 1.0 and 2.0 is his power to pardon people. And, you know, he may have been misusing that power, but everything he's done is completely legal. He can pardon whoever he wants, whenever he wants, but only for federal crimes. Though the really important part about us as state prosecutors is if we bring a state charge and we secure a state conviction, just like Alvin Bragg did against Trump himself, you can't pardon it. And that means that they do not have Trump's shield of protection for the state crime of murder, for example. You get convicted on that, you're going to prison, and Trump can't spring you.
Well, let's transition to a case that is currently happening here in Norfolk that now is turning into an international manhunt. I'm talking about the case of Lina Guerra. She was a woman found dead inside of an apartment freezer earlier this month, and now her husband, David Varela, a 38-year-old Navy Reserve service member, is believed to be on the run international. And the attempts right now is to get him for this particular case. Ramin, obviously this is something that is going to be across your desk with all of this. What can you tell us just from the basic information first of what you know about this case and where you guys are in the investigation?
I've known about this case basically from its inception, and I mean, the night that the police were searching Lina's apartment, I was actually in Washington for the meeting of FAFO. But I got a telephone call about it and knew that the police were looking for her and had my lawyers there as I am at every homicide scene if I'm not out of town, and as we are on every scene, period. I have to be really careful about talking about the facts for 2 reasons. One, we want to see David Varela arrested, and if I talk too much, I could jeopardize the ability to bring him to justice. The other is that as a prosecutor in Virginia, ethically, I have a duty to make sure that Mr. Varela has a fair trial, and as fair as possible. And that means that I'm not allowed to talk about the facts of pending cases. We do our talking in court and in court filings. But I know that you have filings from the federal court, so I know that a good number of the facts are out there.
Yeah, I'll read some of those because I know you can't talk about it, so that's perfectly fine. But so just make sure everybody understands a timeline of this. Her family, Lina Guerra's family, which are in Colombia, they had reported her missing in January after they hadn't contacted her for weeks, which was not normal. February 5th, police executed a search warrant at their apartment in Norfolk and found her body in a freezer. Autopsy later confirmed that this was a homicide. So flash forward, now we have the charges of first-degree murder and concealing a dead body against her husband, David Varela. You're looking at him right there. But we also have information now that we've been reporting that investigators believe that he fled to Hong Kong around the same time of Guerra's body being discovered. There are multiple agencies we know who have been in on this case, working to try to obviously find him and bring him to justice so that he can see his day in court. Certainly the family is wanting some answers to this. Ramin, this is where I can bring you back into this case. Again, not speaking maybe to the specifics of this, but with that information, if it is in fact true that he has been able to flee to Hong Kong, there are some potential barriers when it comes to the U.S. China had a former agreement when it came to bringing people back in, if they were the final extradition. Where does that stand now? And as a prosecutor, can you speak to both the international maybe challenges of what it looks like when you're working with international police and other agencies, and then also the challenges specific to maybe China or Hong Kong?
Yes, I'd be glad to, Eugene. I'm really proud of my team in my office. We're 42 lawyers, we're 50 staff, and the work that we've done on this particular case, a lot of which won't come to light until after there's a trial, but it shows that we can walk, chew gum, and juggle at the same time, and that a case that would completely paralyze a lesser office or would consume all of the resources, we handle it, and we handle it well. I have been a prosecutor now for 19 years. I've been a prosecutor both at the state and the federal level. This is only the second time in my career that we have had to involve an international arrest warrant, that we've had to file what's known as an Interpol Red Notice. Interpol being the umbrella organization by which the police departments of 190-some countries cooperate. The last one that I did was in 2011, and it involved extraditing somebody who had engaged in child exploitation from Italy. And I was with the Justice Department in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Charlottesville. That case went up to the Italian Supreme Court because the man fought extradition. He's currently in prison. In an American prison. We got him back. But this process is also difficult on purpose. The Interpol is a consortium. They exchange information. It's a clearinghouse, but they carry out. They don't do the actual rubber meeting the road. That is, in the U.S., it's people like the FBI or state or local police or their equivalents in foreign countries. But Interpol, covering 190-some countries, covers countries that are very free and countries that are very unfree, places that are authoritarian and places that are democratic. And there are safeguards in place that make extradition difficult by design, so that, for example, the United States government or the Canadian government can't be used as muscle to enforce laws to oppress religious minorities, political dissidents, folks who would be engaging in conduct that would not be considered a crime in the country where they have sought refuge or where they may be found. So it is hard on purpose. What that means for us, and for example, in the case that I handled in Charlottesville, which is closed, and so I can talk more freely now. In that case, the suspect had been arrested on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Evidence had revealed that he had been sexually abusing an underage girl, and during the course of the investigation, he had been living in Louisiana, but he was working on oil rigs off the coast of Nigeria. And he suffered a medical emergency while at a layover in the airport in Rome. And that's how he wound up in Italy. And wound up in an Italian jail for close to a year as we litigated getting him back. But the paperwork that we had to put together had to show the Italian government that the charge was legitimate, that there was evidence to support the charge, that the crime would be a crime in Italy and not just in the United States, that that wasn't a case where the death penalty would have been applicable. We had to say what the maximum punishments were. We had to certify that we were not going to seek the death penalty, for example. And there was still due process rights in the Italian courts for that man. In this case, we have had to follow those similar procedures. We have had to provide the information to Interpol, what the facts were as we see it, what the charges were. I consulted with the Norfolk Police Department, and we agreed, for example, to file the charge of first-degree murder up front. Normally, that is something that we do following, or we do at indictment. Customarily, even if we think we're going to proceed on a first-degree murder, in Norfolk and in most cities around here, the charge starts out as second-degree murder. However, having dealt with the changes in charges, that can often reset the entire process with Interpol. I discussed with the Norfolk police, let's bring the most serious charges so that we can certify to the receiving government and bring the person back.
And the understanding is that murder here would also still be considered murder in China. In that case, that's also a crime that they would have as well, to your point earlier.
It's probably the only crime in the world that's universal. It's obviously there are different ways of proving it, different defenses, different grades, but murder is murder all over the world. It's been that way since Cain killed Abel.
Facts for that. But specifically, if you can, you just talked about your experience in working with Interpol and these international agencies, but from the specifics to China and Hong Kong, I referenced the extradition treaty that we had. I believe it was suspended a few years ago, 2020. How does that factor into this, if you're able to talk about that?
I can talk in general terms.
Yeah.
Countries govern their extradition, their agreements to swap, criminals back and forth by treaty. And the treaties will lay out, okay, well, for example, we'll extradite for this, but not for that. Or, for example, we won't extradite if you're going to try to kill the person. There will be sort of ground rules in effect up front. In places where there is not a treaty in effect, whether it's either because the treaty has been suspended or where there's never been an extradition treaty, because there are countries like that too. Or they may have a treaty to extradite to one country but not to another. Those become case-by-case requests. And there are some instances where the extradition where the country asking for the return of a suspect will get a no. There are other times where they'll get a yes. But it's not governed by a set of rules of the road. So if we're trying to get somebody back and there isn't a treaty, what we hope and expect is that the facts of the case and the demonstration of the seriousness of the offense will persuade the country to send the person back to us, even if they don't have, a treaty is basically a law, even if they don't have a law that they've agreed to that says that they would.
All right, Sarah, let's do this real quick. Let's put his face back up there again. David Varela, that's the look of the man that is currently wanted by police. You're looking at him on the right there, accused of murdering his wife. There to the left, Lina Guerra. If you see him, you are asked to call police. If you know at any point where he may have gone or where he could be or any information that can help the case, as you've just been listening to, call the crime line, 1-888-LOCK-YOU-UP. Reach out to your local prosecutors as well, because they are desperately trying to find that man on your screen. Ramin, thank you so much for joining us here today. Anything else you want to leave the people who are watching this or will see it later? Anything else you want to share with them, either about this case or about the new coalition that you all have formed?
I'm really glad for Lena and for her family that a lot of people have been moved by her death and by her killing. The most common crime in the world is domestic violence, and the most underpunished and underreported. We're doing better now than we did 100 years ago when people thought it was just their prerogative to beat their women. We recognize that this is wrong, but these are still immensely difficult cases. What I would hope is that the media attention that has come to this case will both lead to Mr. Varela's arrest so that we can hold him accountable. I would hope that it would also serve as a reminder to family members that they've got family who need help. A reminder to victims of intimate partner violence that you don't have to suffer like this. You think you do because you've been brainwashed, but you don't. That there are resources like the Norfolk Family Justice Center that is available to victims from all over Hampton Roads. It's over across from Costco. It's part of my office. And we have services available. Don't become a statistic. Don't. You deserve better. You deserve better than this treatment. And I also remind people that, for every one of these cases that we're discussing, there are scores of women dead in the ground, and men too, but primarily women, dead in the ground with somebody at large who aren't getting this kind of media attention. And that if anybody has information on homicides or violent crimes that they've been sitting on, please just give it to us. No judgment, just give it to us so that we can hold people accountable, we can provide closure for families, and we can, even if it hasn't escalated to murder, we can try and save people's lives so that they don't have to experience this.
I think that's an excellent way to end this conversation at this point. Norfolk's Commonwealth Attorney Ramin Fatehi, thank you so much for coming in and talking about not only your initiative, but in particular, you can hear the desire you have in that to help people who are in similar positions and obviously to solve this case. We appreciate you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're going to take another quick break here, but we'll have much more here on Live Impact News, so stick with us. Thank you for staying with us here for Live Impact News on 13 News Now Plus. Our next story, we're going to take you to Texas, where today a judge is expected to exonerate 4 men who were wrongfully accused in 1991 in Austin, Texas, of a murder of 4 teenagers and a yogurt shop there. This case has been widely popular throughout the years, but again, today we are expected to hear that a judge will exonerate those men officially from those convictions. We did record the moments in which this was taking place just moments ago, so let's go ahead and play this coming out of Austin, Texas.
There were over 50 false confessions to the yogurt shop murders alone. And sadly, this was not the only case in which false confessions result in wrongful prosecutions and convictions. We now know that methods of questioning and the age and vulnerability of the suspects can result in false confessions. And then prosecuting the case when there's a lack of evidentiary corroboration to the confessions can result in a wrongful conviction. But we can't go back in time and change what happened to the 4. What we can do is make sure the truth is known. And the truth is that Forrest Wellborn, Maurice Pierce, Michael Scott, and Robert Springsteen are innocent. They did not commit the murders, nor were they involved in any way. The truth is that Robert Eugene Brashers is guilty, and he alone committed the yogurt shop murders. For these reasons, at the close of this hearing, we'll be asking Your Honor to amend our previously filed motions to dismiss pending further investigation, to dismiss all cases based on actual innocence. Thank you.
Do representatives of the exonerees wish to give a statement?
May it please the court. Thank you, Judge Blasey, for giving us the opportunity to be heard and to have this hearing and have the opportunity for the truth and justice to come out. Thank you. This is an extremely important case. On September the 29th of 2025, this past September, there was in this city a very large and very public press conference that included, among others, Kirk Watson, the mayor of the city of Austin. In that press conference, it was announced that there is now, and I quote, overwhelming evidence, unquote, that the yogurt shop murders had been committed by a single perpetrator, Robert Brashers, a man now known to be a serial murderer. Brashers acted alone and in fact had committed at least one murder prior to the yogurt shop murders and had gone on to commit several more murders across the southern and central United States. Always acting alone. Sometimes, as in this case, there were multiple victims. Sometimes, as in this case, he tied the victims with their own clothing. Sometimes, as in this case, he sexually assaulted a young girl. Sometimes he would wield 2 firearms, as in this case. Sometimes he set fires to destroy the evidence, as in this case. Always acting alone. The victims, as far as we know, were always women. Therefore, Robert Springsteen, Mike Scott, Forrest Wellborn, and Maurice Pierce are innocent and always have been innocent. Since that press conference and announcement on September the 29th, Detective Jackson has continued his investigation, and the evidence of Brasher's guilt and the innocence of Springsteen, Scott, Wellborn, and Pierce remains overwhelming. You will hear from Detective Jackson, who was assigned this case as a cold case in 2022, and how he worked on this case, he and others with the Austin Police Department worked on this case relentlessly, and how in July of 2025, he submitted a spent .380 shell casing collected from the original crime scene by the Texas Department of Public Safety in 1991 and submitted it through the ATF by a task force officer to the National NIBIN database. This was in July of 2025. The same day he submitted it, he got a hit. There was an unsolved murder case in Lexington, Kentucky, where the murderer had used the same gun. This set off what I would characterize.
You were just listening to the moments there. Again, today, a judge hearing the request to exonerate 4 men there in Austin, Texas, of those 1991 murders in a Austin yogurt shop of 4 teenagers. And something interesting of note is we are now taking a live look here, a live look of these proceedings, is that we were just told that the district attorney in this case, who was asking to exonerate these men, Jose Garza, is also one of the 9 prosecutors as a part of that FAFO unit that we just had Norfolk Commonwealth attorney Ramin Fatehi speak on for the last several minutes or so. So just wanted to tie that in with this. But now let's go live. Again, this is the moments in which a judge is expected to make a decision on exonerating Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Welburn in connection with the murders of 4 teenage girls at a yogurt shop in Austin in 1991.
Yes. And then about a month after he was released, he went to Memphis.
Yes.
What were the basic facts of the Memphis case?
He conducted a home invasion where 4 women were inside a residence and displayed a firearm and bound them all with different ligatures and then sexually assaulted the youngest girl.
And it was 3 adult women and then the mother, including the mother of the 14-year-old, is that right?
Yes.
And they lived.
Yes, they all lived.
And we know that he was able to overtake all 4 by himself.
Yes.
And in their descriptions, he had a gun, they were scared, and he was able to make them tie themselves up and sexually assault the 14-year-old. Is that right?
Yes,
ma'am. And then in 1998, we have the Shearer murders. Is that right?
Yes.
What were the facts of that one?
A man and his son had left briefly to run errands, and they were only gone for about 40 minutes. And when they arrived back at their home, he found his wife and daughter had been tied up and shot in the back of the head. And the youngest girl, Megan, had been sexually assaulted.
And she was 12 years old.
Yes.
And then that same day after he left the Shearer residence, he went to Dyersburg, Tennessee.
Yes. About 2 hours later, he attempted another home invasion in Tennessee. And fortunately, the woman was able to get the door closed. He did fire 1 round and shot her in the arm, but then fled the scene. And they were able to link, based off the description of him, they went further, investigated the Missouri police and the Dyersburg police, took the projectiles from both scenes, and were able to confirm this was the same assailant.
Sort of how you were able to connect the yogurt shop casing with the Kentucky casing.
Yes.
And then that was in March of 98, and then we've got November of 98, Lexington.
Yes.
And as you described, that was a business that was set on fire.
Yes, ma'am.
And then Brasher's committed suicide in January of 99.
Yes.
So I'm not going to make you go through this chart. This was put together by Pam Mazak at the Texas Attorney General's office.
Yes. This is sort of an association chart of evidence and crimes that we know of.
And this demonstrates, I think, the complexity of the investigation and the amount of evidence that we have against Brasher's at this point.
Yes, this chart was a collaborative effort of local, state, and federal investigators over many, many years, including a whole lot in the last few months. But each piece of this puzzle is linked to Brasher's. So real quickly, Brasher's never paid for any of his crimes, except that one in Florida. He was clever. He was able to evade justice for many years. He would change his name. He had multiple aliases, birth certificates. Sorry, not fast. Okay. He wrote an obituary for himself and published it in a couple of different papers. He was in multiple states. He was always traveling. He rarely, that we know of, committed a crime where he lived. And so we wanted to look at, well, he's looking pretty good for our case, but where was he in December of 1991? Was he in prison? Can we place him in Austin or Texas at all? So we here at Austin started researching Brasher's to try to figure out if we can place him in connection with the overreach shot. So remember, the murders of these girls occurred on December 6, 1991. Well, we found out through records research that Robert Eugene Brasher's was stopped less than 48 hours later leaving Texas. He was stopped at a border checkpoint going I-10 west out of the state near Las Cruces. And during this checkpoint, the Border Patrol agent discovered not only was he driving a stolen truck that had been reported stolen 9 days earlier out of Georgia, but he was in possession of a 380 AMT backup model with that serial number. Now that 380 AMT backup model was what ballistics reports said, in all probability was the make and model of the gun used at the overshot. So he's got the same make and model 48 hours later, and with that specific serial number comes in important later. So he's charged with auto theft and felon in possession of a firearm. It was probably seemingly not important at the time, but the gun was released to his father at some point. There's no date when it was released to his father, but it's in the record that it was turned back over to his father.
And after he was initially stopped, he fled for about a mile and then stopped.
Yes. And then gave up.
Do you have any theories, and I know it's nothing definitive, about what happened in that mile?
My theory is that he knew he couldn't do anything about the 380, but if he was still in possession of a 22, they needed to get rid of it. There's really no reason to flee after a checkpoint and then stop a mile. If you're going to flee, you keep going. It's very desolate. There's no artificial light out there, so if he threw a gun at the window, you wouldn't see it. And so that was our theory. We have no way to prove that.
And they never did an inventory of the other items, any other items in the car, is that right?
No, unfortunately, there was no inventory. The only inventory that was done was items missing because the truck was a construction vehicle, and so there was a lot of tools that were no longer there.
And there were items missing from the girls. Amy's brother's jacket was missing from yogurt, is that right?
Yes.
Right, but that was never recovered, and we don't know if it was in Brasher's truck because they never did an inventory.
Correct. There's no inventory. No. So we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. All we have is a Y profile, and there's limitations to Ys. They're good at excluding suspects from cases, but it's really hard to say definitively, or you can't really say definitively if it is that person, because they're not as discriminatory as a traditional autosomal DNA profile for like CODIS, or like so you can have people with the same Y profiles. So he's looking pretty good. I mean, we could, if he was alive, we'd arrest him, but we got to be beyond probable cause here. He's dead, so we got to be beyond reasonable doubt. So in September of 2025, we, in coordination with DNA Labs International, we submitted some more items for additional DNA testing. And while these items had been screened previously or tested previously, we thought, technology's gotten better. We don't think we'll get enough DNA for a full CODIS profile, but it's possible we could get enough DNA to do a one-to-one direct comparison to Brasher's. And because that's a threshold. The quality and quantity, you can have less. So, male DNA was found on the fingernails of Amy Ayers, on her left fingernail clippings. They've been taken at autopsy, and we were able to directly compare those to Robert Brasher's, and the DNA was the same.
And sorry, just to be clear, the four were excluded from that census, right?
Yes, we've done additional testing since, and everything we've tested is excluded from as well. So now we have his DNA, his autosomal DNA, and his Y profile at the crime scene. And we believe, and in my opinion, that the gun that he was stopped with 2 days later was the gun that was used to kill Amy Ayers. He was released from prison in 1997. His dad was able to get the pistol back. Then we have the Lexington, Kentucky murder in 1998, which was an AMT backup model, and it's the same gun used in the yogurt shop. Then a month later, or 2 months later, he commits suicide with an AMT backup model, a .380 caliber pistol, and it's the same handgun he was stopped with on I-10. We know that by the serial number.
And when he committed suicide, he'd also been in possession of a knife only?
Yes, he had 2 guns at that time, and he threw the 9mm out the window and chose the less powerful gun. And we know why now, that this gun was his prize. That he shot himself with that .380.
And it took him 6 days to die.
Yes.
You've said before that confessions and science both can't be true.
Correct.
For example, in the confessions, there's various narratives of some of the 4 being in possession of the .380 after you were shot.
Correct.
Is it your opinion that that's possible, based on what you know about the .380?
Based on that last slide, no, that is not possible.
In the confessions, there's no mention of an unknown male being part of the crime. Based on what you know about the DNA, is that possible?
No, the DNA points to one man.
And in the confessions, there were confessions to the sexual assaults.
Yes.
Based on what you know about the exclusions of the 4 from the vaginal swabs, is that possible?
No. Just a little bit more about him, and then we'll be done with Brasher's, hopefully, for a while. The MO, he's documented to carry more than 1 gun at a time. He ties up his victims, sometimes with their own clothing. He sexually assaults young females, often shoots them in the back of the head. And in Kentucky, we know it was the same gun, similar details, and now, since Kentucky has worked their case, they have confirmed with DNA that Robert Eugene Brasher is a suspect in the murder of Linda Rutledge. So, based on the DNA, ballistics, and modus operandi evidence, it is my conclusion that the deaths of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison were committed by Robert Eugene Brashears. Based on that, I further conclude that Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Forrest Wilburn, Maurice Scott did not commit these murders. Thank you.
Thank you, Detective Jackson, and thank you for your investigation. And
The attorneys for your daughter, has got any questions of this witness? Step down. And does the state of Texas have any other witnesses they wish to call at this time?
Yes, Your Honor, state calls also these two witnesses.
You just heard the person there at the stand saying, based on the evidence in which they have, they can conclude that the person who actually committed those murders were not the men who were convicted for them. You heard him say a name. It was this man right here. That you're looking at is Robert Eugene Brashers, who died in 1999 and has been linked to this case based off of DNA evidence all of these years later. Also, for those of us who are here in Hampton Roads, this man was born in Newport News, but he's been linked to murders across the country there. But in particular with this at the moment, with the deaths of these 4 teenage girls there in 1991, which is the center of this case. And so you heard them say, and what has brought us to today's hearing, that they believe that the 4 men who were convicted in this case and should be exonerated fully from it. And that is the moment in which we are seeing here today with that hearing taking place in Austin, Texas. Those men, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn, that they should be exonerated at the request of the district attorney there in Austin, Texas. We do need to take a quick break. We'll be right back here with Live Impact News. Thank you for staying with us here on Live Impact News. Now we're going to go back to Washington, D.C., where the president is holding the inaugural Board of Peace meeting between the United States and several other leaders from around the country. Not present is anyone from the Vatican, with the Pope saying earlier this week that he would not participate with this group that was originally formed to reconstruct Gaza. We do have remarks that were made just moments ago. The first that you will hear is from Vice President J.D. Vance, and then you'll hear from Secretary of State Marco Rubio as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, very much for your leadership, but also for the kind words about me personally. I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but then after the President said that I was so smart and that I didn't want to repeat our Congresswoman who froze for 20 seconds over in Munich, now I'm tempted, sir, just to freeze for 20 seconds and just stare at the cameras, and maybe they'll say nice things about me like they do about Congresswoman Cortez. But I have three very brief messages. First of all, to the President of the United States, but to the entire team, to Marco, to Steve, to Jared in particular, who've done such an incredible job. I think what this Board of Peace represents is a recognition that if you actually have a President of the United States and a team that's committed to diplomacy, it can actually work. When I look at what happened to Israel on October the 7th, all those innocent people who were murdered, the fact that you had all of these hostages, and of course, a terrible war that came from it, I remember thinking to myself, how is it ever going to be possible to get these hostages home safely, to make it possible for the people of Gaza to actually have a reasonable future, but also to ensure that Israel is never attacked again? It turns out the answer was you just needed a president who was committed to the effort and committed to the work, and that's what we had, thankfully, under the leadership of this president. And you got to make peace, but then you have to make the peace stick. And that brings me to my second point. That's what the Board of Peace, I think, is fundamentally about, is making the peace stick. And it's an incredible thing that you guys have all done. So to all of the leaders gathered here today who are investing in the future, who are investing in peace, we're grateful to you. We're grateful for your partnership. And in particular, I think to the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Armenia, who I just saw last week, thank you all for making it possible and for showing what real leadership can accomplish. When you set aside weapons and killing and destruction and invest in your people and invest in prosperity, it can create great things. So thank you both for what you did. I think it showed great leadership. And finally, to the American people, I think it's important that the American people recognize why we're here today. And the reason that we're here today is, yes, to save lives and yes, to promote peace, but this creates incredible prosperity for the American people. The countries represented here represent trillions of dollars of investment in the United States of America that would not have been possible without this president's leadership and advocacy for peace. The economies here represent millions of American jobs of people who are receiving products built in American factories and made by American workers would not be possible without a focus on peace. So, Mr. President, while I think this is great for the world, I also think it's really, really great for the United States of America, so we're looking forward to the partnership. With that, I want to turn it over to the MC for the rest of the program, and that is our great press secretary, Carolyn Levitt. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, Mr. President and Mr. Vice President, for convening the first ever Board of Peace meeting, and we will now hear from our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
I'll be brief and to the point. We want to talk a little bit about the strategic vision of this organization and begin doing so by first acknowledging that we are here today because the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, has both an ability and a willingness to use the power of his office to think outside the box. And that's why we're here today. This was a very unique crisis in Gaza. one that the existing international institutions could not solve or figure out. It needed a very specific type solution that required the partnership of all the nations that are here, including those that are here on an observer status. And we appreciate you coming today and being a part of this as well. And that's the point I want to drive home today. And soon you'll hear from Steve and Jared, who, by the way, deserve an incredible amount of credit for pulling this together and working countless hours and traveling all over the world. They truly deserve our appreciation and thanks for the work they've put in under the leadership of President Trump to make this possible. This Gaza situation was impossible to solve under orthodoxy, under existing structures. And so what we did is they went to the UN, and they got the UN's approval to put this group together and bring these nations together to come up with a very specific solutions to a very unique and specific problem. We have a long ways to go. There's a lot of work that remains. It will require the contribution of every nation state represented here today, and we thank you for being a part of it. And we hope that this can serve as a model for other complex and difficult situations so they can be solved in the same way. But right now the focus is on this one. We have to get this right. There is no plan B for Gaza. Plan B is going back to war. No one here wants that. Plan A, the only path forward, is one that rebuilds Gaza in a way of enduring and sustainable peace where everyone can live there side by side with one another and never worry again about returning to conflict, to war, to human suffering, and to destruction. And again, Mr. President, thank you for having the vision and the courage to pursue something that has never been done before, and we're not done yet. And thank you to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for the time and the work they put into this. And thank you on behalf of the State Department and the U.S. government to all of the nations that are here. Every one of you is indispensable, including our observer partners, who we hope can find your way to join us at some point as officially part of this. But we are grateful for the fact you're here today and the contributions you've made already. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. We will now hear from our Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I don't know if we ever believed that this was possible when we first started envisioning a board of peace, but of course, under the President's indispensable leadership, and it begins with that. It begins with President Trump's leadership and his direction. We are here today, and it's pretty amazing. I think we have some people to thank. We had an amazing partnership between the mediating countries, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, Prime Minister Mohammed. You are an exceptional human being. You really are. Ali, thank you for everything you did. That's you right over there, Ali. Wherever Hakan is, Hakan, you were amazing. And so was Ibrahim and President Erdogan, and of course, to the Egyptians, Badr, I know you're smiling because we went through so much, and General Hassan was amazing. We all became friends here, and Prime Minister Sisi, President Sisi, pardon me, and so many others. But our team, JD, your insight, your counsel, and Marco, you're an amazing secretary, and it's a privilege to work for you. And Jared, you are my dear friend and the best partner I ever had. You are an amazing person. But Mr. President, it is my greatest honor to work for you. It is the blessing in my life. I've had many blessings. I don't have to be a practicing lawyer anymore, but this is my greatest blessing. But I also have to mention one other person who is important to this discussion. Oh, the Israelis, I forgot. Prime Minister Netanyahu. Without him, much wouldn't have been accomplished as well. And that's really important that we acknowledge him here today, and Ron Dermer. But a person who doesn't care much about the acclaim, we have to acknowledge too, and that's you, Susie. Because I would come back and you would say to me on every trip, what can I do for you? This matters. And you are an inspiration for all of us. So I thank everybody, and let me get on to, am I going on to the next slide?
Sure.
Caroline?
Sure.
Okay. So with regard to the hostages, we're here today, again, I say it, I know it sounds redundant, but we're here today because of President Trump. Without him, none of this was possible. There were 251 hostages. 168 came out alive. 83 bodies were returned to their families so that they could grieve and remember their loved ones like in a normal way, in a way that brought their families together. So that was just as important. This was a monumental effort, and I want to tell a story about the president. Every time a hostage family came to visit with us, they were not on the president's schedule. I would walk down to the Oval Office, I would tell the president that there was a hostage family here, and he would say, "Steve, bring them up," every single time. Mm-hmm. And when we got the last 20 out, we had a celebration at the White House, and I could see the emotion on the president's face. And he came up to me and he said to me, "I have to tell you, this is my 5th year in the Oval Office, and I don't know that I've ever had a more special time than this moment with these people, seeing them come home." And I said to the president, "You have to look around because none of them would be home without you, sir. None of them." So I only want to tell you, Mr. President, you gave me my greatest honor to work on this effort, and I thank you.
Again, those are the moments that we are able to hear from Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and then you just heard the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff talking as they are now undergoing. This is a live look at the president and the other leaders there for this inaugural Board of Peace meeting as they are looking to expand the reach beyond what this group was originally formed to do, right? We were originally told that this group was going to come together in order to help to reconstruct and rebuild Gaza after the Israel-Hamas war. Now they're trying to do that approach much larger. Now, in terms of the actual reconstruction of that area, several countries have now pledged, according to President Trump, significant amounts of money in order to go into that effort. But there's still a lot of questions that are coming out of this at the moment in terms of what it would actually look like in action. So we're thinking out of today, maybe some of that is what will be revealed with this meeting amongst the leaders who are currently there. So we will see. That is yet to be determined. We'll figure that out as we go along and as this meeting continues this morning. But for right now, it is 11:37, and we got to talk about the forecast here. We haven't done that so far, and the reason why we need to talk about it as we bring in meteorologist Evan Stewart here. Evan, right behind you, that look right there, where is that? Because I can't see what are we looking at?
Well, this is our
this
is our Norfolk Tower cam. So we're looking across the Elizabeth River, and we have the fog that is out there. So that camera is up a little bit higher, so it's up more into the clouds and some of that low fog. But we're looking across the Elizabeth River there, over towards the Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth, and on the weather computers here, we've got a few more cameras, and the fog has lifted compared to what we saw earlier today, but we still have some reduced visibilities out there, and we've got a big range of temperatures, too. So visibilities in Hampton, 2.5 miles, a mile in Newport News. Of course, that's at the airport. And over in Langley, 5-mile visibility. In Norfolk, 2-mile visibility. In Virginia Beach, that's at Oceana. So all of these sites that we report, they're all at the airports, and because, that's where you get the most reliable sensors. And, of course, pilots need to know, what the temperature is, what the winds especially, what the pressure is so they can set their altimeters. So that's why, most of your recording sites are at the airport. I know there's the old joke, when we always say, it's 42 at the airport, and people are like, well, who lives at the airport? That was the old George Carlin joke. But it's just because that's where the reliable sensors were. They're monitored and maintained by, either the Weather Service or the FAA. So that's why we do that.
Before you go on, just real quick, for those who are looking at that graphic that you had pulled up, you can pull it back up there, Sarah, for the visibility. That means you can see 1 mile, 5 mile, 2 miles ahead of you?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so they have a special instrument that is out there that measures the visibility. And, whether it's bouncing off of raindrops or whether it's bouncing off of snow or fog, it gives you that visibility. And of course, the lower the visibility, the denser the fog is. This is the other thing that's interesting. We mentioned yesterday that there would be a wide range of temperatures. Look, it's 40s, 50s, and 60s on the map right now. It's 42 in Norfolk. This morning, we were 59. So we've seen that wind switch around and come in here out of the northeast. East-northeast winds at 10 miles per hour. That has knocked those temperatures down significantly, through coastal areas. I live in Chesapeake, and as I was coming in, it's like, it's not too bad out here. We're in the upper 50s, near 60 degrees, but you get to Norfolk, and it's in the 40s. Even going up the peninsula, 52 in Williamsburg, but it's 45 in Newport News, and Hosky, it's 63 degrees, and we are tracking some of those showers. It's not as heavy or as steady as it was in spots a little bit earlier today. We'll still see some isolated showers into the afternoon. I think a lot of it is going to lift off towards the north a little bit later on this afternoon. So going over the next several hours, we'll see the temperatures bouncing around. We'll see areas of fog. We'll see some off and on showers. I think we'll see the temperatures go up a little bit and go down, and maybe a significant rise in temperatures tomorrow, back up into the 70s. Then we have to watch the weekend, because we do have a coastal system that is going to come through. And that is going to bring us some rain that could potentially end as some snow across the area Sunday night into early Monday.
Oh, my goodness, that word again.
I know, another weekend, and another chance at some snow. So I termed kind of the forecast for this afternoon 40s, just because the temperatures are going to really, literally be all over the map. And should get up into the low 70s tomorrow. And then, yes, looking ahead towards the weekend, rain likely on Sunday, but then as the cold air comes in, we will likely see a changeover to a mix of rain and snow, or possibly even all snow. But these transition situations, getting accumulating snow, or impactful snow, is a little bit difficult. Tim and I were talking about it last night. We may issue a weather impact alert for Monday morning if the evening models come in. So that's a little inside baseball here on Live Impact News. This is what we're allowed to do. Talk about it.
We can.
So, we can. So Tim and I were discussing it yesterday. So, if the models continue to show, possibly some impacts on Monday morning, of course, that's, back to work, back to school, coming in on a, off the weekend. That's what we're looking at. Not necessarily that we're going to have significant accumulating snow, but it's enough that I wouldn't be surprised if things play out that we see a school delay or something like that.
Yeah, I was looking at the potential high for that day of 42 as well, and even with the 32 there. From your estimation, it's still only a possibility, but we're not thinking of something that would really relatively stick for a long period of time anyway, because it looks like the temperatures might be too warm.
Yeah,
for that.
Temperatures are borderline. It's coming off, even if we're 71 degrees, coming off of, a warm day on Friday, and then, still in the 50s on Saturday. So, getting anything to stick. Now, if it comes down heavy enough, it could stick on grass and, tops of cars and things like that. Could make a few, sidewalks slick or something like that. But I don't think it'll, at this point, be too terribly impactful on the roads. But, you get one of these roads that could be in a shady spot, when you think about the cities having to make these calls on school delays or school cancellations, it's not just what's happening on the road in front of your house. They have to look at the entire city or the entire county and, what the buses have to deal with. You don't want the buses out there if there's even the possibility, of some slick spots.
Okay. All right. We'll wait to see what you guys decide. As we get closer to Sunday and Monday, but you kind of said it jokingly. It seems like the snow, when it does come, it wants to come on a weekend. It just can't come during the week when I'm already at work. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know that quite a few of us will already be,
I know,
be working and get called in, and that's what we do.
So we will for sure if that's what it comes down to, for sure. But Evan, I know you have to get ready for the noon show.
That's right,
So
yeah.
we're so thankful for you to come through. So we're going to let you go so you can tell the masses on our linear programming coming up on 13 News Now at noon what's coming up within our forecast. And we will, for the next few minutes, we'll take a quick break. And on the other side of this, we'll have the last few minutes of Live Impact News. Okay, we're going to go back to Austin, Texas, where the DA there has pushed to exonerate 4 men who had been convicted in a 1991 murder of 4 teenage girls at a yogurt shop there. Now that investigators have linked DNA evidence to the person they say really killed those 4 individuals. So we have a live hit right now. Let's see if we can go into the courtroom and see if I believe we just had someone speaking. Let's just go to it and see if there are more people coming up. There we go. There are. So we're going to take this for the next several minutes.
I'm Sharon Shipman. Forrest Webber is my youngest son, my youngest child. First, I want to thank DA Jose Garza and Detective Dan Jackson for following through to the resolution of this case. Also want to thank the Innocence Project of Texas, especially Michael Ware, and Attorney Steve Goodson for their support and assistance in this process of legal innocence and exoneration. Additionally, Robert Eisenhower Ramirez, may he rest in peace, and Linda Eisenhower Ramirez, who were God's blessings to us after Forrest's arrest in 1999. And a thank you to all the loyal family and friends who stood by us through all these years. This nightmare should have never happened. These young girls should have never lost their lives. The nightmare for my son Forrest and our family should have never happened either. Forrest never confessed to this crime, as you've heard, nor did he say he knew others who were involved. While he wasn't put through a legal trial or convicted in court, he was harmed by the interrogations, the arrest, 2 months in jail, and the certification hearings. He has suffered immensely for 34 years. Not only from the policing and legal system, but also because he was convicted by much of the public and media. I'm so proud of Forrest for never wavering on his innocence in this horrible crime. even when he was often pressured to save himself by confessing. He was offered a plea deal by the assistant DA if he would tell them what they needed to hear. Not the truth, but what they needed to hear. His dad and I were in the room when that offer was made, but later in court it was denied that a plea offer was ever given him. Forrest was 15 when first questioned in this case. He was also approached by detectives parked on the street as he walked to school, told to get in and go for a ride. He was questioned then, still 15 years old, without his parents' knowledge. Being so young, he didn't know he could decline. He was also devastated about these murders, afraid of what had happened in his neighborhood to girls his age and some from his school. And he wanted to be helpful. He knew he had nothing to do with it, so thought it could only help to cooperate. But from that moment, his life changed. Over many years, detectives subjected Forrest and his family to pressure, insisting we say that he confessed and that he was involved. It was heartbreaking, frustrating, and downright scary to see Forrest suffer for the rest of childhood and his entire adult life. I could feel his anxiety, depression, stress, and anger, and it was hard for him to trust anyone. These emotions trickled down to all his relationships throughout these 34 years, affecting every aspect of his life. He constantly had strangers approach him about the case, most often unpleasant encounters. He also lost relationships and friendships over the years. The knowledge that much of the public and even some extended family and friends believed the story that he was involved weighed heavy on all of us. When arrested, Forrest was issued a $1 million bond. He called me later that day and asked me to please bond him out, that he couldn't stay there. It broke my heart to remind him how much the bond was and that there was no way I could get the money to get him out. He called me as often as possible from jail, short, heart-wrenching calls. I wrote to him daily, trying to keep his spirits up by telling him that tons of people were praying for him. After the arrest, I had constant worry and fear. At one point, I started having nightmares, sometimes about the investigating detectives, sometimes about mobs coming to my house to lynch me. I lost a lot of sleep during this scary time. It seemed so real, and I never knew what would come next when I tried to sleep. My privacy was invaded, and I felt my safety at risk. I was married when Forrest was arrested, but the stress and emotions were too much. We separated and later divorced. I ended up taking a second job to pay the bills and continued working 2 jobs for 18 years. What kept me going were prayers, family, especially my daughter India, my other son Eric, my sister Donna, and my mom Charlotte. I persevered knowing that I needed to be strong for Forrest and his son, my grandson. But it took a heavy toll on my health, my well-being, and my relationships. Forrest experienced betrayal of having his tools stolen from his shop when he was in jail, causing him to have to close the business. He worked on cars from his house for anyone who was willing to still do business with him. Bills still had to be paid. I've seen him do any kind of work he could think of just to make money to live. He drove an 18-wheeler for a short time. He worked for any type of construction. I've seen him struggle so much. For a time he was homeless, sleeping in his car even in cold winter. He moved to Lubbock and then Ohio to try to make a new start, but neither worked out long term away from the support of his family. He's tried hard to make a life for himself, usually working for himself, a lonely life. This case just never would go away though. And that reduced his opportunities for employment and impacted working conditions. I'm so proud that he has never given up under these hardships. Forrest and his sister, my daughter India, were very close. Her entire adult life was haunted by the false accusations against her brother and worries about what could happen to him. She was in nursing school when he was arrested. She heard someone say, "Did you see they arrested Jesus?" Because Forrest had long hair back then. And then the whispers and glances started. Under that public scrutiny and fear for her brother's life, she had a breakdown. She pulled out of school just weeks before she would become a registered nurse, never returning to nursing school. She, like me, constantly worried about something happening to him legally or as a vigilant act of vengeance. Her concerns for Forrest were very real and affected her deeply. We, especially Forrest in India, felt someone was watching and following him for years. And just 6 years ago, even after the DNA test showed no links to the boys, he was approached by detectives as he made his daily stop for a breakfast taco and a monster drink. They called him over to their car, the detectives did, to discuss the yogurt shop case. During that time, India was telling us someone was watching the house. Police records confirmed she was right. When Maurice was killed, the fear was even stronger. Forrest told me he was routinely being pulled over by officers for no reason, sometimes once a week. He called me and said, "Mama, they're trying to Maurice me." I saw for myself the harassment he was experiencing when one day we had to switch vehicles so he could work on mine. His car had dark tinted windows. As I drove from his house to mine, I was pulled over without cause. I waited until the officer got to the door before rolling down the window. The look of shock on his face when he saw who was driving told me everything Forrest said was true. The officer fumbled trying to find a bogus reason for stopping me. Over the years, detectives and media showed up unannounced at Forrest's home, his place of business, and his dad's house. Between detectives, media, and other people reacting to media reports, it just never stopped being an oppressive part of our lives. I'm grateful every day that his calm kept him alive through this persecution. How different could our lives have been without these false accusations, arrests, public suspicion, and being stalked by detectives and media? How much better would Forrest's life be today without these struggles and stress his entire adult life? How much better would his sister, brothers, son, and parents' lives have been without the endured worry for our loved one for 34 years? There are so many victims, so many lives harmed for so long. Of course, we wanted these murders to be solved, but not at the lifelong expense of innocent lives. On August 5th of last year, as my daughter India was dying from brain cancer, she privately told me that when she got to heaven, she was going to find out who the killer was, and she would make sure we and everyone knew who it was, so Forrest's name would finally be cleared.
And you're hearing the passionate plea there from a family member of one of those men who had been convicted in the 1991 killing of those 4 teenage girls. Again, today, a judge expected to officially exonerate those individuals after a plea from the DA's office and the investigators finding that DNA evidence had actually linked those murders to a man who was that man right there, Robert Brasher, born here in Newport News.